It was a cool autumn night. The fire was warm on my face. The wind was cool on my back. The air was as cool and crisp as you could expect from the autumn season. My tent behind me held all the necessary supplies for the weekend camping near the Great Lakes in the northern United States. Supplies weren't an issue. Food wasn't an issue. However, firewood was. The blaze was fading from a raging fire to cold embers quickly. The wind started howling, nearly extinguishing the small flame that was left from my source of warmth and light. At this point, my fire was more smoke than flame. I watched the smoke rise into the air and cast a stark contrast between itself and the bright stars in the sky. I knew I would have to venture out to gather more firewood soon. I was so relaxed and really didn't want to get up, but I knew it must be done. So that's what I did. I stood up, brushed the dirt off my jeans, grabbed my torch from the tent, and wandered into the darkness. I've always loved nature. I used to always love nature, particularly mountains and lakes. This made the Great Lakes seem like an ideal place for a vacation for me. Autumn is my favorite season, so that is when I decided to go. Late September, I boarded a flight across the Atlantic. Eventually, I landed in Chicago. I didn't stick around long, the whole city just felt gray. I bought a few supplies that I couldn't bring by plane and made my way up to the intended camping location in the Newberry State Park. It was a bit of a trip involving a bus and an Uber. I told the Uber driver I'd see him in a week and set off into the state park. It wasn't long until I made it to my camping lot. It was only a few kilometers from where I was dropped off, and I enjoy hiking. I stopped, breathing in the fresh air, and looked forward to my relaxing week, surrounded by these massive lakes. This was my first time camping in this part of the world, and I wanted to be sure to take in as much of the experience as I could. After this moment of contemplation, I slung my backpack off my shoulder and heard it hit the ground with a thud. I pulled my tent and stakes out from the bag. I'd set up a countless number of tents before at this point. It was basically second nature. I knew I had to set up my campsite now as the sun was already beginning to set on my first day. There would be time to explore tomorrow. The first night was cool, but not cold. The wind was calm. The air was fresh, and I was content. I snuggled up in my sleeping bag, found a comfortable place to lie, and began to try to drift to sleep. I heard owls. I heard toads. I heard insects. It was all very calming. Then, it hit me. An unexplainable sense of dread. While trying not to succumb to anxiety, the smell hit me. The fresh air was replaced with the smell of rot. It hung heavy in the air, but only momentarily before passing. The sense of dread lingered for what felt like forever. Thinking back, it was probably only about 20 minutes. I peeked outside. I could see well enough from the light of the embers from the once roaring fire. My campsite was clear. The smell, I assume, was just a rotting animal, the stench carried by the wind. After all, wolves are common in this area. I eventually drifted to sleep. I woke up, and everything that had happened the night before just felt like a vague dream. It wasn't going to stop me from enjoying the rest of my trip. Not like I could leave anyways. I didn't bring my cellular phone, as this was supposed to be a getaway. My Uber wouldn't be here until next Monday anyways. So, I began my hike to Lake Michigan. The sight was absolutely breathtaking. There was so much water it seemed more like an ocean than a lake. Islands dotted the inside of the lake on the horizon, which only added to the illusion. There were ripples in the water where fish would come up to eat the insects that scuttled across the top of the water. I ended up just taking in the sights and sketching for most of the day. However, eventually I had to head back to my campsite. This is what continued for most of the week, with no more strange occurrences. I spent my nights at the campsite, and during the day, I would hike and absorb everything that this piece of land had to offer. I watched animals from a distance, including moose, eagles, and even a couple wolves. I couldn't help but remember the smell of rot that those same wolves probably caused near my site. It made me chuckle a bit. Friday came along, and I knew that soon my life would be back to normal. I'd be stuck in a boring job. My routine of camp, then hike, then relax would be replaced by work, go home, sleep, wake up, work. I didn't look forward to it at the time. Now, I'm glad my life is back to normal. Night was beginning to approach. I had made it back from my hike. I had drawn an amazing sketch of a moose in the distance. I placed the sketch in my binder and began building a fire. The wind had been picking up gradually throughout the day, and I knew it would be a cold night. By the golden light of sunset, I gathered up some hefty logs and branches. I brought them back to my camp, and was overcome by that same sense of dread. I decided to ignore it. The fire was roaring, and all seemed at peace. This is where my story begins. I was having trouble sleeping, and it was the wee hours of night. The fire was dying. I had to go get more wood. Once I got past the tree line, I had recalled that I had collected most of the wood near my site throughout the week, so I ventured deeper. I had my torch to illuminate my path, so all felt well. I have a habit of keeping my torch shining in front of me, instead of at the ground. It was because of this that I kicked a rock, causing me to stumble to the ground. I heard a crack. The dirt was cold and wet. When I looked up, I noticed I was surrounded by darkness, pitch black. I scrambled for the torch, hoping the fall just knocked the batteries loose. My hands come in contact with the object that had led to my fall. It was unusually smooth and very light for a stone of its size. It had unnatural indentions on it. I hold on to it. I want to get a better look at it when I find a clearing or my torch. Eventually, I am able to find my torch in the darkness. I give it a quick shake, and my heart sinks as I hear the rattling coming from within it. At this point, I knew that the bulb had busted. I was stuck in the dark with only the waning moon for light. I wait a few moments to give my eyes time to adjust, as the trees and their canopy of leaves above me were blocking most of the light. Eventually they do adjust, and I make my way to a clearing that I'd spotted in the distance. In the clearing, it was bright enough for me to see clearly when coupled with my eyes having adjusted. I wanted to know what this object was. And the first thing I noticed was the color, a light beige. There were cracks running through the top. As soon as I began to rotate it, I realized what it was and dropped it immediately. A skull. A human skull. Those strange grooves were teeth and eye sockets. I feel sick. I'm overcome by that same sense of dread. I drop to my knees and vomit. Then, it hits me. the smell of rot. The smell is strong this time, like the fresh dead. And blood? Is that the smell of blood? I recall thinking to myself. The smell is getting stronger. It's making me want to vomit again, but there's nothing left. I stand up. At the edge of the trees I see it. It's tall and skinny, gray and red. Antlers protrude from the creature's head. There is blood covering its whole body. Entire chunks of skin were missing, and some of the skin was hanging like leather straps off of its body. Bone was visible underneath the stripped skin. Each of its hands were long, the fingers were long, and even more frightening, its fingernails were long and curved like the claws of the eagles I had seen earlier. There was what looked like flesh hanging from the nails. It was dragging something long. It was a body. The body was clearly missing a head. Other than that, it was still whole. Maybe it was another camper? I was stunned and feared for my life at this moment. My body wouldn't move. I couldn't force it to move. I was feeling nausea. Between the gruesome sight and the horrendous stench, I felt like fainting, but I knew I would be dead if I did. I couldn't faint. At this moment, our eyes met. Its eyes had a slight glow to them, red. While my brain was still trying to comprehend this creature, it let out a horrendous roar. No, more like a scream. It sounded human, but also had the slight howl of a wolf. At the sound of that, my legs started to move on their own. I was running. I don't know where I was going, but I had to get away from there. As I ran, I built up the courage to look back. It was still there, lunging through the trees in massive strides. Its body was so thin. It seemed so weak, but it was so fast. As I moved through the forest, I could see more skulls and bones, partially buried in the dirt. I didn't want to join them. At this point, fight or flight had taken over. I was ready to do both. I have a fair amount of knowledge on animals. I may not be able to do much to it, but could probably stun or weaken it. I make the decision to turn and fight. There was no way I could outrun it. No way that I could win in a fight, but I had to at least try to make some more time for myself. While it was still running in the middle of a massive stride, I throw the busted flashlight at it as hard as I can. It connects. It hits the monster square in the face, causing its head to lurch backwards, and the whole creature stumbles. As it was sliding, it moved to all fours and, like some kind of demonic animal, regained its stance in a matter of moments. It was once bipedal, and now it's on all fours. I hear a low growl. It sounds more like an impersonation of a wolf than an actual wolf. Almost like a human trying its best to sound like one of the forest's greatest hunters. It was at this time I clearly see its face. It looks almost human other than the exposed lower jawbone and horns sprouting from its head. It lunges at me and tries to slash at me with its massive, bloody claws. I catch the arm. It was about 3 feet long, which made it much easier to grab onto. In this moment, I quickly go for the eyes in an attempt to blind it. If I can succeed, I may be able to escape. The creature's head dropped. It was attempting to ram me with its vicious antlers. It connects. I feel these massive horns dig into my flesh and through my muscle. This is my chance, though. I make a fist and keep my thumb rigid. I dig my thumb into the massive, glowing eye. The creature lets out a horrible, blood-curdling scream, the kind of scream you only hear from someone who's facing death. The creature reels back. I take this moment to run. I don't look back until I make it to the campsite. My chest is on fire, my lungs are burning, my legs don't want to move another inch. I vomit some more. Mostly just dry heaves. There's nothing behind me. I notice the air is crisp and fresh once more. I think I've made it. I wasn't about to stick around to find out, though. I grab the essentials, throw them in my hiking bag, and leave. I make my way back to the ranger station I had seen on the way in. By this time, I had lost a lot of blood and felt sick. My vision was blurred. The rangers had left for the day, but there was a phone left for emergencies. I used it to call the local law enforcement. I take a seat and wait. I put pressure on the largest of the multiple incisions and try to stop them from bleeding. When the police arrive, they ask about my wounds. Of course, I can't tell them what actually happened, so I tell them I was attacked by a wild moose. On the way to the hospital, I sketch the creature I saw. It will always be in my binder to remind me of why I can't take nature for granted, and the scars to remind me not to return to the Great Lakes. This was over 5 years ago, and I haven't gone camping since then. I think it was October. The nights had just started to draw in, and there was a definite chill in the air. I had just got off the bus after a long day shopping with my friend, and was walking the 5 minutes to my house from the bus stop. The time was about 5:30, maybe closer to 6, but can't be sure. As I came around the corner onto Larch Avenue, it was starting to get dark. It wasn't pitch black yet, but there was only minimal natural light left. The avenue was dimly lit with the encouragement of a few randomly placed streetlights, meaning you would have to walk through the odd dark patch in between the white circles glowing softly on the pavement. And this could prove difficult at the best of times, as the roots from the large trees planted on either side of the road had in some places forced their way through the tarmac, causing the footpath to lift and crack to let them through. I walked a few steps down the path when I noticed a man standing in the middle of the road, about halfway down. He was wearing a long, pale blue coat with pale jeans and had dark, scruffy hair. I could only see what he was wearing because the street light seemed to highlight the light colors. I couldn't see his face as he had his back to me. All I could see from where I was walking was that he was looking up into the tops of the trees that were all towering high above the road to meet in the middle. I remember this because the whole time I was walking down the road, I was trying to figure out what he was looking at. At one point, I smiled to myself as I thought maybe he was a bit mental and there may be a carer somewhere running the streets looking for him. I had thought of maybe going over to see if he was okay. Maybe he needed some help, and there's an overwhelming feeling deep inside me that told me this was a bad idea. As I got closer to him, my smile quickly faded, and my stomach began to sink. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, as the daylight seemed to be disappearing fast, but the closer I got to him, the worse I felt. As I realized that my eyes were seeing correctly and I'd soon have to walk past him. He was wearing a pale blue hospital gown and trousers to match. At this point, I was worried. There were no cars around on the avenue and not many houses either. I put my hand into my bag to feel around for my phone, and then I physically stopped in my tracks, staring down at my bag in disbelief. I remember that my phone had gone in the washing machine 3 days previous. I started to feel sick. Adrenaline spread through my body with a strange numbing sensation. My heart was pounding so hard in my chest I could feel my body pulse with every beat, and I wanted to cry. After a couple seconds of standing rooted to that spot, my brain kicked into action again. I thought to myself, I can't just stand here. I looked back up in the road, and the man was no longer staring where he had been standing before. I felt vomit rise up in my throat as the panic of not being able to see him anymore started to sink in. I swallowed it back down, and after one final scan up and down of the avenue, I took off running, trying my best to avoid the tree roots reaching up through the pavement. The autumn night's air set my lungs on fire as I struggled for breath, but I just couldn't make my feet stop. When I finally reached the other end of the avenue, I forced myself to stop running and try to catch my breath. My chest burned as I doubled over and emptied the contents of my stomach all over the pavement. When I looked back down the avenue, I could see the man. He was closer to me than before. He was standing on the path now under a streetlight. He wasn't looking in the trees anymore. He was looking directly at me. His eyes looked so black that they looked empty. My eyes must have been playing tricks on me, as I could have sworn he had no eyes, just empty sockets, but that can't have been true. His mouth looked bloodied, his skin was very pale, and his blood-stained gown blew ever so slightly in the wind. His gaunt face was frozen in an agonizing scream that still haunts my dreams till this day. The more we held eye contact, the harder my heart was beating. I wanted to run faster to my house, which wasn't too far now, but my body was too shaky. It felt like all the energy had been sucked out of me. My vision was starting to get fuzzy and go black. I think I almost passed out. The man glided from under the light towards me. No, men don't glide, they walk. My eyes must have been playing tricks on me again. He must have taken a few steps towards me. I clumsily stumbled backwards, tripping over a tree root behind me, my arms and legs too weak to break my fall in any way. I came down hard on my elbow and let out a whimper. I heard a car coming. It turned on a large avenue, flooding the poorly lit road with bright headlights. I looked up in horror as I realized that I couldn't run away, and this man was practically right on top of me, but to my surprise, he had disappeared. A wave of calm engulfed me, and I got myself to my feet. I had a look around, but everything felt still and serene. I had almost forgotten about the sickening fear and panic I had just been feeling not 2 minutes before when the sharp pain shot up through my arm as I tried to move it, so I held it tight to my waist and headed home. When I got in, my mom was watching the television, so I asked her if she would take me to the hospital, and she did. I didn't explain to her what just happened because I myself thought maybe my eyes were just playing tricks on me, but it felt so real. If I couldn't even believe it, then how would someone who wasn't even there? I went to the hospital and had an x-ray. Turns out I had fractured my elbow and had to wear a sling for a few days whilst it healed. I got all my pain medication and a few slings from the doctor, and after a tiring 5 hours of being at the hospital, we headed home. My mom took the turn on a large avenue on the way home. As we came around the corner, she slowed the car, turned to me, and asked what that man was doing, standing in the middle of the road. at this time of night. My walk home from school was always a relatively uneventful one. I cut across a park that is right next to the school, and from the park it's just a couple blocks to my house. I've never had any trouble walking home by myself. It's something I've always done, ever since I was 13. Well, I can tell you now, it is not something I'll be doing any longer. Last autumn, I had stayed late at school working on a stupid group project for history class, where we had to build a castle out of cardboard and crap like that. It was pretty easy work, but none of us in the group felt like going to each other's houses to do it, so we opted to stay after school. Since I didn't really know the other two kids that well, the project was silent and rather awkward to do, and I ended up doing most of the work. When we finally finished our castle, it was nearly 5:30 p.m., and we all gladly got out of that situation as quickly as possible. Once I was out of school, I began making my way to the park. Now, if you have never been to Illinois in the later months of the year, dusk comes quickly in the fall. Street lamps buzzed and slowly grew bright as the sun began its climb behind the horizon. In the park, I made my way past the swing sets. My strides were long and quick as I was anxious to get home. Though, however determined I was to make it home, it only took one small sound to stop me dead in my tracks. It was a soft, gasping sound, as if someone was short of breath. I turned my head to look at the slides, the area I thought it was coming from. I saw a little girl with long black hair. She was kneeling down by the slide that was the nearest where I was standing, with her back facing me. At first, I wasn't sure exactly what to do. Calling the police crossed my mind, and my hand reached down to feel the shape of my phone on the outside of my jeans, just to make sure it was still there. When I did, the girl's sobbing became louder, and I felt the urge to help. I approached her with mild trepidation, taking my footsteps slow towards her. "Hey, are you okay?" I asked her. "Go away," she yelled back without moving. I stopped moving for a moment, actually considering heeding her words. But then I saw she didn't have a jacket. In fact, her shoulders were bare. She was wearing a white tank top. When I looked down, I saw that her legs too were bare. She was wearing dirty white basketball shorts. It was not a warm autumn night. Actually, the wind was picking up, and it was turning the cool autumn air chilly as the sun sank deeper over the horizon. Her skin, which I could now clearly see was naturally dark, had become pale in the cold. A deep sadness fell on me for the girl in that moment. She must have been homeless. Some tragic story forced her into the situation she was in, no doubt. The girl only looked to be a few years younger than I was. I walked towards her with new determination, unzipping my jacket to give to her. I decided that I would give her my jacket now, and call the police a little later so I wouldn't embarrass her. I didn't want to, but this girl clearly needed more help than I could give. I took off my red and blue Cubs jacket, and I outstretched it towards her. "Here, take my coat at least." Her sobs ceased, but for a moment she didn't move. I waited patiently for her to accept my offer. I didn't want to nag her any more than that. If I was in her situation, I would probably be too proud to take it. Then, the girl finally began to turn her head slowly to look at me. I dropped my coat and stumbled backwards, falling on my back when I saw the girl's face. "I told you to go away," the girl said, almost sorrowful, as I scrambled to pick myself up off of the dirt. As I stood up, the girl began screaming, a loud howl that rang out and echoed all around the playground. I clapped my hands around my ears and I looked at her face one final time, and I don't know, disbelief or morbid curiosity maybe. I just needed to confirm that what I saw was true. And it was. The girl's eye sockets were completely devoid of anything at all. All at once, her screaming stopped and she raised her head, sniffing the air like an animal. "You're still here, boy. I smell you," she said, and her blue lips curled into a ghastly smile. Well, that was enough for me. I turned and I hauled ass all the way home. I didn't look back, but as far as I know, the eyeless girl didn't follow me. Once I got to my house, I rested for a moment on my porch, looking around to see if she was near, but she was nowhere in sight. Now, believe it or not, after all those crazy moments of all in that park, life was pretty normal for me after that. I didn't cut across the park to go to school anymore. In fact, I began to make sure I left when one of my friends did so that I could walk to school with them. Nothing similar to that experience ever happened again, and I never saw the girl again. Then, a couple months ago, I began to wake up in the middle of the night to a sound outside. It sounded as if some animal was sniffing around, just outside my room. Whenever I got up to check outside my window, though, I wouldn't see anything, and the sound would be gone. This happened for a long time, up until last night, in fact. I woke up to the same sound outside my room. By then, I assumed it to be some raccoons sniffing around the trash cans that were near my bedroom window. When I checked the window this time, though, I found it to be opened up about 9 inches. My heart skipped a beat, and I shut the window quickly. I grabbed the baseball bat from under my bed and searched the entire room, looking under my bed and in my closet, and even out in the hallway. But I found nothing. Eventually, I calmed down and became tired again. So I went out to the kitchen to get a drink of water, came back to bed. When I got into bed and under the covers, I felt something under them with me. It was fabric of some sort and felt like another blanket. I grabbed it and pulled it out of the covers to examine it. It was a red and blue Cubs jacket. The sound of autumn leaves crunched beneath the soles of my worn Doc Martens. Hues of red and gold surrounded me and the leaves as they quietly snapped and drifted to the ground. A cool breeze whipped my hair around me. Using my spare hand, I brushed the hair from my face and walked up the porch steps to my home. I'm in my second year of college. I'm studying to be an architect. I'm still living with my mother, who works as a nurse at St. Francis South. Every day when I get home from school, she is always in the kitchen, preparing something delicious for me to eat. My mother is a blessing. I push the heavy door open, and my nose is instantly taken with the aroma of Italian seasonings and sausage. Maybe? "Mom," I yell as I set my books down on the table near the front door. I bend down and pull the laces from my Docs and kick my boots off, tuck them neatly against the wall next to my mother's Crocs. I poke my head into the doorway and look into the kitchen. On the stove is a large metal pot with a lid on. Next to it is a small skillet with already cooked Italian sausage. Looks like spaghetti tonight, I thought to myself. Mom, I yelled again, only louder this time. Ava, honey, I'm upstairs. My mom's voice carried down the stairs. I walked up the stairs in search of my mother. I was starving. My mom and I always ate dinner together. She hates when I start without her. She has always been one for a proper family meal. I walked up to her bedroom and knocked softly on the door. When she didn't respond, I turned the knob and pushed the door open gently and peered inside. The room was empty, but her closet doors were open and the light was on. I walked into the room and turned towards the closet. Mom? I said, a little quieter, not wanting to startle her. I walked around to the closet, and its open doors revealed the stairs that led up to the attic were down, but the attic light itself was off. Just the thought of her being in the attic in the dark gave me the willies. Maybe the bulb was blown. I leaned against the attic stairs and tried to adjust my eyes to see in the darkness, and the square cutout above me. Mom, where are you? Seconds ticked by with no response. Mom, are you okay? My mom spoke just loud enough for me to hear. I'm in the attic, honey. I couldn't quite pinpoint it, but something was off. Something was not quite right. Ava, will you please grab that flashlight off the dresser and come give me a hand with this box, please? Sure, Mom, hang on. I walked over to pick up the flashlight. Ding! My phone buzzed in my back pocket. I pulled it out and tapped the screen. The light came on. The screen read, one message. I opened the message and all of a sudden my throat felt like I had swallowed a glob of sand. Hey Ava, had to run to the store, needed some frosting for the cake. Dinner is on the stove. Go ahead and set the table. I'll be home in a few. Mom. I broke out in a cold sweat. Maybe she anticipated she would be gone longer and actually got home before I did. Maybe she is in the attic and needs my help. My heart was hammering beneath my chest. I couldn't think straight. Tears started welling up in my eyes, blurring my vision. I was absolutely terrified. I began to stumble towards the bedroom door. Ava! The voice in the attic called. Only this time, it was not my mother's voice. It was horrid. The sound made my skin crawl. I cried out and slapped my own hand over my mouth to keep quiet. I sobbed quietly beneath my palm, just as I inched past the attic steps towards the bedroom door. The steps retracted and the attic door slammed shut. I almost jumped out of my skin. In response, I ran. I ran as fast as my wobbly legs would carry me. I stumbled down the steps, doing my best not to fall, and just as I got to the bottom of the steps, the front door swung open, and my mother walked in, a single grocery bag dangling from her wrist. What was that thing upstairs?